Hello, and welcome to It Starts With a Question. I'm your host, Crystal Williams, president of Rhode Island School of Design. I'm a poet, essayist, and daughter of Detroit who is curious about how others experience the world and how their unique experiences shape how they move through it. Throughout my life, people have often told me that they feel like they can tell me anything. I think that's because, at root, I seek connection and deep understanding. Maybe it's the poet in me, but I've always been most interested in learning about the why over the what or how, so we can crack open the core of the matter and get to the heart of what makes us who we are. For me, it starts with a question, so we might learn what else do we dream for this human project. Today I'm chatting with award-winning children's book author and illustrator Grace Lin, the daughter of parents who immigrated from Taiwan and settled the family in rural upstate New York. As a member of the only Asian American family at her school, Grace longed to blend in rather than stand out. So rather than study the hard sciences as her parents wished, when it came time to attend college, Grace chose to attend RISD to study illustration. After graduation and a short stint at a giftware company designing mugs and t-shirts, she took a leap of faith to pursue her dream of being a children's book author and illustrator. After the publication of her first book, The Ugly Vegetables, in 1999, Grace has been writing stories and picture books for young people ever since. Grace's books often feature children of Chinese descent, not only to showcase her heritage, but also to include aspects of Taiwanese and Chinese culture. She's earned numerous awards, including Newbery and Caldecott medals. During our conversation, Grace and I had the opportunity to reflect on her journey, coming into her own as an artist. So it's so good to see you again.
So good to see you too.
Thank you for coming back.
Thanks.
So before we even really get started, I'm fascinated by these purple streaks in your hair. Like, do you always have some sort of color in your hair?
Yeah, recently, I think in the last couple of years, it's been like that. I think this one is supposed to be cherry chestnut, but I had pink in it before, so I think now it's kind of turned into purple.
It's turned into purple, so it's matching. So I'm always interested when people do sort of creative things in their hair or on their bodies. Has this been you said the last couple of years with the hair, but have you always sort of been creative with the way you present to the world?
Oh gosh. That's a really interesting question. I don't know if it's been so much creative, but I think I've always been very conscious of how I look to the world. I mean that goes all the way back to childhood, being the only Asian, being the only Asian in the area. So I think I've always been conscious of that, and I like to I guess if there's things in, like, I like to paint with bright colors, so I like to wear bright colors. So I like to, for when I first colored my hair pink, just the streaks, I had this whole idea of like, pink was a color that when I was younger, I had disdained because it was too girly. And
reclaiming something that felt lost to you.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. So you've talked a good deal about being the only Asian kid when you were little. And I know that part of your practice as an artist, actually, I mean, what percent of your practice as an artist really stems from that experience of being the only?
Probably everything, almost everything. So I grew up in upstate New York, where my family was one of the very few Asian families in the area. So that meant I was the only Asian girl in my class in elementary school, year after year after year. And that really shaped me for better and worse. And I think it's still, in some ways, it still shapes me. So, and I guess you can see that that's pretty much all of my books feature Asian or Asian American characters. And so much of that is because that's what I really, really hungered for when I was younger. I really wanted to see myself in a book. I guess I should backtrack a little bit because being the only Asian in my elementary school, I had this kind of really weird sense of identity. And it was kind of strange that everybody knew who I was. I was the Asian girl.
Yeah, you're the Asian girl.
Yeah, the Asian girl, but nobody knew who I was at the same time. Like that was all I was.
You were seen and unseen.
Yes, and it's this very strange feeling of everyone knowing who you are, but nobody knowing who you are, and nobody caring who you are because that was all you would be, you know. And I just longed so much to see somebody like me who was kind of like fully realized as a person. And because I had this weird sense of isolation when I was younger, I found a lot of comfort in books. That's where I felt like books, all the characters in books felt like my friends, right? And so I was reading and reading all the time, but there was no one who looked like me in books. And that's really what I hungered for, was a friend that looked like me, a friend who would be fully realized, a fully realized person like me.
But Grace, I just want to pause for a second. I want to get to the fully realized self and what that means in books and reflection and so forth. But this question about people seeing you as only Asian, but not actually seeing you.
Yeah.
In a moment when, as kids, I resonate with this, right? Like this feeling of being invisible on some level, like being the fundamentals of oneself being invisible. Were your fundamentals clear to you even? Because that's an added layer of complexity, if not.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I don't think they were.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like when I was younger, because I didn't see anyone who looked like me in my peers, only my family. And I didn't see anybody on TV or in movies and books.
Because was this the 70s, 80s?
Yeah. So there's nobody that looked like me in my community. There was nobody that looked like me in TV. There's nobody that looked like me anywhere. Like I didn't feel like I was fully realized. I guess I'm using that as terms, but I'm not sure if that's the correct term. But I do know that for a long time, I tried really hard not to be Asian.
What did that look like? What did that mean for you?
Yeah, so like I think for for a long, but honestly, that was kind of so. I was born in 74, and so like. And this is a completely different time than now. So when
so different.
So when I grew up, my parents were actually approached by the school system. Like this is what I'm saying. It's a different time, and they're like, don't speak to them in Chinese. It will delay their language skills. And so my parents never spoke to us in Chinese, and so we never learned Chinese or Taiwanese. And like my dad would see what the neighbors' cars were like, and he would go out and buy the same car. So it was very much the time of trying to fit in, assimilate, yeah. And so so many times I just tried to pretend that I wasn't Asian. One thing that I often talk about is how everyone in the community kind of went along with this idea, like, let's pretend that she's not Asian. Because I remember when I was in 5th grade, I had answered a question in the classroom, and one of my classmates was like, "Oh, she only knows that because she's Chai." And then the teacher stopped him and said, "No, we don't." She actually didn't say anything. She says, "No," and she just kind of shook her head, and then she moved on with the lesson. But everybody in the classroom knew what he was going to say. He was going to say, "She only knows that because she's Chinese." but everybody knew what the teacher was saying. It's like, we don't talk about race. We don't mention that Grace is Asian. We don't mention that she's Chinese. We don't talk about it. And so, looking back as an adult, I realized, there was no malice or anything in this. It was the time where like, we're going to make colorblind kids that don't see race, and how that didn't really work out the way like how like I said, there's no malice, but like, as the only Asian child in that classroom, I didn't feel colorless. In fact, I kind of felt like, oh, I have this secret that everybody knows. It's not really a secret, but it's so shameful that we don't talk about it. Like, the fact that I'm Asian is such a bad thing. We better not even mention it. And so that was kind of this idea of like, oh, I'm going to pretend that I'm not Asian. I'm just going to pretend that I look like everybody else in my class. And I did a really, really good job pretending. Another anecdote I often talk about is like, in 5th grade, there was we were putting on the school was putting on a play, Return to Oz. And so all the girls really wanted to be Dorothy, and I really wanted to be Dorothy too. And so in the schoolyard, we would all the girls who wanted to be Dorothy would practice singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow over and over again, hoping to get the part for the play. And then on the day of the audition, all the girls who were trying out, we were all practicing that one last time. And I remember turning to the girl next to me and saying, hey, today's the audition. Do you think they might choose me to be Dorothy? And she looked at me, she's like, but you can't be Dorothy. Dorothy's not Chinese.
Yeah.
And it was like this, like slap in the face. But it wasn't, what's so interesting when I look back at that is that I wasn't angry at her, or I didn't feel hurt by what she said in I wasn't like, oh, that was so mean. Instead, I felt really stupid. Like, I felt like, oh, she's so right. How
could I have even imagined
that I could have gotten this part, or how, like, I'm so dumb. Why didn't I remember that? Like that there's no way I would have gotten that.
So it breaks my heart for you, for little you, for little you. And I recognize the duality. I mean, Du Bois talks about the sort of double consciousness, right? How one operates in one sort of space and then one operates in another space, and having to carry that. And there's, there are tropes all over art, right, about this. And for you, then this turns into, because in your house, if I remember, your parents brought in these sort of Chinese fables, and you, the artist, the budding artist, were like, I don't like these images are bad. And so at what point, because I'm fascinated by the whole thing, but partially what I'm fascinated by is I hear you not interpreting that the people in your surroundings thought about Chinese people in derogatory terms, that this was not a derogatory thing to be. It just was a different thing, and you were trying to not to be that.
Yeah, I think to me back then, different was derogatory.
But the Chinese part of it was not the thing. It was just the difference was the thing.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was my takeaway, was just being different was really something to be avoided, ashamed of, perhaps,
So that was your takeaway then?
Yes.
Is that still your takeaway now?
I think there was a kind of childish naivete about that, where I felt like back then it was just being different, and now I see, looking back, I can parse the subtle racism that was underneath. It was not just being different. It wasn't just like, I wear glasses and you don't wear glasses. It was much more subtler and a little more insidious than that. But I would say as a child, I took it very much as like different, bad, not the other subtle things, which now looking back, I do see, which is kind of painful.
So you get these fables from your parents. You look at the artwork. You're like, You've got this reality that you grew up with, which is this visible, invisible, this undercurrent of erasure.
Yeah.
And you decided somehow at some point to fill the gap.
Yeah. Gosh, let me backtrack to the fable, sir, because I think I need to give a shout out to my mom about that. So as I said, I really kind of rejected my Asian heritage. And when I hit about 6th grade, my mom suddenly realized, oh, I think this is a mistake. There's an issue here. Yeah. And so she started trying to teach me all about our Asian heritage. Unfortunately, I think it was a little too late because I was like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want to learn Chinese. I don't want to do any of those things. And so she realized that if I was ever going to learn anything about our Asian heritage, she was going to have to sneak it in. And she saw that I liked books. She saw at the time I was really into fairy tales because I loved the beautiful illustrations and the dresses and all those things. So she went out and she got about 6 to 12 Chinese fairy tale and fable books, Chinese stories that have been translated into English. And she put them on the bookshelf in the living room because she knew if she gave them to me, I'd be like, I don't want them. So she just put them there. And she hoped that because I love books so much that
you would find them.
And
very clever.
Yes, very clever. That's why I feel like I have to give that shout out to
Thank you, Mom. Thank you.
Because it worked. And I did find the books, and I did read up every single one of them. But as you know, these books were not really well produced. They were English translations of Chinese stories. So the writing was very plain. They were printed on this cheap paper, and they just had these kind of like plain black and white illustrations on them that were not very thoughtful, and when you compared that to these beautiful European fairy tale books I was looking at, like the Edmund Duloc's, the Arthur Rackham's, that were like these gorgeous lush illustrations and like the gold edges and things like that, and then you compared them to like these cheap paperback Chinese storybooks, you could see why I wasn't really impressed with these Chinese books. And also I think it kind of reinforced this idea I had that my Asian culture was not as good as this Western culture that was all around me. And so that was something that kind of stayed with me. And so I loved books. I loved fairy tale books, and like I said, I loved the illustration. So I was like, I want to be a fairy tale illustrator. I want to illustrate Sleeping Beauty. I want to illustrate Cinderella, and that love of books and creating illustrations stayed with me. And that's actually the whole reason I came to RISD, the whole reason I majored in illustration. I wanted to be that kind of illustrator. But as time went on, a lot of things happened here at RISD, a lot of things happened in my life, and I started realizing, gosh, all those feelings I had about my Asian heritage, how kind of wrong-headed they were, that my Asian heritage was actually not something to be ashamed of. It was actually something that was quite precious and something that was something really wonderful and lovely, and something that deserved to be like heralded, not tucked away and under the bed. And so I started trying to find connections to my Asian heritage. And I had so few connections to my Asian heritage because I had because I had disdained it so much when I was younger. And I had the two strongest connections I had to my Asian heritage was food because of what we ate, and those fairy tales
that you had scoffed at.
Yes, exactly, because I remembered them.
Yeah.
And because that was my tenuous thread, I really clung to it, and I made that thread stronger and stronger and stronger, making it into a real bond. And you can see that in a lot of my books, and you can see that like in probably my most popular book, Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, which is kind of like a retelling of all these Asian fables and fairy tales. And that book, to harken back to what we're talking about, I worked really, really hard to make that book as beautiful as possible. Like, even though it's a novel, it has full color illustrations in it. You know, we paid attention to like the font and the page numbers and every little detail, the kind of paper. And it was all because of those cheap Chinese fairy tale books. I remembered how when I looked at those cheap Chinese fairy tale books and I was like, oh, these are no good. And I didn't want any kid who took my book that were based on those same stories to feel that same way. And so I really try with all of my books, but especially the ones that are based on these Chinese fables or these Chinese folk tales. I really try to make them feel like something precious.
To elevate it.
Yeah, like a treasure. So that when kids read it, they're like, oh, this is something special, you know, like this is something valuable.
At what point do you begin to recognize that the creative endeavor that you've undertaken as a profession, that what you are doing is filling a gap or is serving a purpose, is being of service to others? I mean, I assume you didn't go, actually, I don't know if I should assume it. I mean, my thought is that you start trying to answer a question for yourself or solve a problem for yourself. But then there becomes a point, doesn't there, when you begin to realize like, oh, I'm actually, this is actually impacting other people.
Yeah. I mean, I think I start doing books with Asian American characters in them mainly to fulfill my own personal desire to reclaim my own heritage, to tell my own story, to make it feel like, make it seem like I existed in this world, and people who look like me existed. But honestly, it was a very uphill battle to get these kinds of books published. You know, my first book was published in 1999, and I remember going to publishing companies before that and like showing them my artwork and meeting. This is back when, so there's no email, there's no internet, there's no web websites.
We're old enough that a cell phone was like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what you would do is that you would call up the publisher.
Yeah.
You would call up the publisher. You would make a meeting, a 5 to 10 minute meeting with an editor, go to New York, meet the editor in the lobby. You wouldn't even get to go up to the office. The editor would come down, meet you in the lobby, hand them your portfolio, and they would flip through it. And if they liked your work, they would take your card and say thanks and bring it back up. And
that's fascinating.
And you would do the rounds, you know, and like, I remember.
Wait. Were you doing that by yourself?
Yes.
There was a lot of chutzpah.
Honestly, it took I'm making a long story short, but like I graduated, I worked for a couple years at a giftware company, like a giftware company, you know, those t-shirts that say like world's best dad. So I worked at a giftware company, did all these things. And I actually, almost gave up on being a children's book author and illustrator, but I actually got laid off from that job. And because that actually was a great thing for me, because getting laid off, I was like, you know, I don't want to make world's best dad t-shirts from the rest of my life. I wanted to be an illustrator. This is my chance. And so it was kind of like this desperation and I don't know if I think for me, and we could talk about this later, is like, I don't know if I have so much courage as so much desperation that pushes me. So I feel like I was really desperate at that point, and I was like, I could feel that this was my chance.
It was an inflection point.
Yeah.
I either am going to do
this,
it
or I'm not.
Or I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And the not doing it is world's greatest dad.
Yeah.
And that's the worst.
Yes.
Got it.
And so I was like, so I got to do it. So I did it, and I was awkward. I remember like stuttering on the phone, like, can I, I'm coming in. Can you meet? Like, and so, but you
got to do it.
And these editors met with me there. So many of them were so kind. But as I was talking about, I remember multiple times I would show them my art, many of the pieces featuring my family and Asian characters. And many times the editors would say, "Oh, I like your work, but I already have an Asian author."
Because we can only have one.
Yes, we already have an Asian author, so we don't need you. And it was like this really like, oh gosh, I have to find the publisher that doesn't have their Asian author yet, or their Asian author's retiring or something like that,
Exactly.
And so it was this kind of really uphill battle. And so when I got that first book published, it was with a small publisher, and the editor of that book, it's the Ugly Vegetables. The editor of the Ugly Vegetables, super wonderful editor, such a kind person. He said, "Oh, I really like your first book. We're so happy with it. Do you have any ideas for a second book?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "I have this idea about my younger sister, Kai Kai, going through the seasons." And he's like, "Oh, that sounds great, but I don't think you should do a book with an Asian character for your second book."
Interesting.
And I said, "Oh, why not?" And he's like, "Well, lots of different reasons." And, when I tell this story, people are kind of horrified, but I really want to preface this by saying he was looking out for me.
He was trying to, if I had to guess, trying to expand your reach.
Yes.
And not pigeonhole you.
Yes, exactly. Like he's like, "I don't think you should do an Asian character because, Asian girl character, number one, I think maybe you should do a boy character because, that'll explain. And I think you should make this character Caucasian because that way the book will have more reach. People will realize that this book is for everyone, and also he said the worst thing is you just came out with the Ugly Vegetables, which featured 2 Asian characters, and that's fine for your first book. But if your second book comes out and it's also Asian characters, then people are going to just call you a multicultural author and illustrator, and you don't want that." And I was like,
God forbid.
Yeah. And I was like, what is that? And of course, back now we call them diverse authors, but back then that was the phrase, the terminology was multicultural. And that meant, I'd be an Asian American author illustrator. That's all I did. That's all my books, who my books are for. It would always be like for this very, very niche audience. I mean, people have to remember this is like 1999. For children's books, it was unheard of to consider a book with a marginalized character hit the bestseller list, or in fact, whenever there's a book with a marginalized character, publishers used to try their best to like hide it, like it would be like a silhouette, like a field of flowers, and so like to make to fool the readers into not knowing that this was a marginalized character. So he was really trying to look out for me, and like so I could have like this career in children's books. But it was really kind of a disturbing realization. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to be pigeonholed. And I remember trying very hard to break out of doing Asian American books. Like I do books on animal characters, and all these things. And your question was like, when did I kind of make that switch and to embrace this Asian American label and to create Asian American books? And it wasn't really a switch. It was like this really slow kind of realization, because I did these books with animal characters, and I would do these books about monkeys and hippos and things like that. And I remember I would go to these book signings, and I would go to book events or festivals, And the people who came up to me were never there for my animal books. It was always these Asian families who would come up to me, like with usually a little Asian girl like hugging the book. And then I remember once there was a woman, a mother, obviously an Asian mother, who had me sign her book, and she looked at me with like tears in her eyes, and she said, "Thank you so much for making this book. I've looked so long and hard for a book like this for my daughter." And it was that over and over again that I started thinking like, oh gosh, the books that are having the most impact are not the animal books. They're actually the Asian books. And then I started thinking about myself and thinking like, gosh, these Asian books would have made a huge impact on myself too. And honestly, when I was really, really honest with myself, it was like the Asian books were the ones that meant the most to me too. I was just doing these animal books so I wouldn't be pigeonholed, so I wouldn't be this multicultural author and illustrator. But if I was really honest, the ones that mattered the most to me were the Asian books too. So I was like, I think I just have to embrace it.
I just want to stop for a moment and pivot to this question about honesty and art.
Yeah.
Right? Because, I deal with a lot of young people. They're 19, they're 20, maybe 22. And so the world we grew up in is not the world they grew up in, but the question, and it's good history, I think. It's important because we still live in a world in which erasure is a thing, right? And right now it's called book banning and it's called anti-DEI and all of that. But I think the other question about, as artists, how important is it for us to be honest with ourselves about our motivations, about our talent, about, all of the things? So you said, sort of in passing, you just sort of quipped, well, when I was honest with myself, but that's not an easy thing to do, right? This can be very painful. So can you just talk a little bit about how you think about honesty in art?
Yeah. And, I really credit RISD actually a lot for this.
Interesting.
Because when you go to RISD, everyone is so talented and everyone is so good at drawing, so good at painting. So, and all of a sudden you start realizing, what am I bringing to the table? Like, it's not just I can draw an apple real good. Yeah. And I remember there was lots of conversations about, what makes an artist, at RISD, and like, what makes an artist? What makes an artist? And I remember having this conversation about how, art is not about impressing people. It's not about saying, look at, it was actually a TA who was talking about this. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but he was like, art is not about just like, look at what a great artist I am. See, like, aren't I wonderful? Give me a pat on the back. It's all about having a voice or a message or something, a vision that you want to share with the world, right? And I remember this, he had said this like freshman year, but I remember that had resonated and I thought about it so long. And I remember I actually went to the European Honors Program here at the Rhode Island School of Design. And I remember, like, I was drawing the landscape, I was drawing the buildings, I was really proud of all my drawings, and I was having a wonderful time. And that's when I was like, because I'm here in Rome, Italy, I'm going to do the most beautiful Sleeping Beauty books in the world, like
you and Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, and like some kind of the symbolism there, but it was in Rome, Italy, when I was having coffee with my homestay family, and my homestay, I guess, brother was like, "Oh, tell me the Chinese word for coffee. And I was like, I'm not Chinese. I'm American. I only speak English. Of course, I have to tell him all this in Italian. And he's like, well, why don't you speak Chinese? Yeah. And so I have to tell him about how my parents immigrated to the United States and I was born in the United States. And I'm telling him this whole story in Italian. And he's listening to me like, Yeah, like, And then finally, who knows what my Italian was like too.
You could have been saying, I blew balloons. Yeah.
But finally, when I'm all done, he's like, okay, your parents moved from Taiwan to United States. Yes. And I was like, yes. And he's like, why? And I was like, I don't know. And it was at that moment I realized I did not know why my own parents immigrated to the United States of America. I was having this conversation in Italian, but I didn't know one word of my parents' native tongue. Like I knew all about the Sistine Chapel. I knew all about like the mascots of Rome, but I didn't know why my own parents immigrated to the United States of America.
Why you were in this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not that story.
And that's when the words of that TA came back to me. Is like, you have to have a vision to share with the world. And I realized, oh, I don't have a vision to share with the world, because how could I have a vision when I've never even looked at myself? And that's where the honesty came in. It was like, I have not been honestly looking at myself. And how can I have my own vision to share when I haven't even seen that? And so that's where the honesty comes in.
Can you, when you are engaging, I know you read a lot.
Yeah.
When you're engaging other people's work, other art, are you looking to experience something that to you seems like honesty from other artists?
Gosh. I think that when I look at other art, I'm looking for something that can become a part of myself. And I feel like, or I don't know if I'm looking for that, but I feel like the best art is something that becomes a part of myself. And I think that only happens when the author or the creator is honest. Does that make sense? Like,
I think so. Unpack it a bit more.
So I feel like it's not so much that I'm looking for honesty, but what I'm looking for can only come from an honest author, illustrator, or an honest artist. Does that make more sense?
It does. It's a very that resonates with me. Like I don't like, for instance, cynical art.
Yeah.
I find it actually on a very basic level offensive.
Yeah.
Right. And we were talking a bit earlier about earnestness.
Yeah.
And earnestness is on your mind. So I hear you saying that for you, good art is a moment of real connection.
Yeah.
Honest connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so talk a little bit, Grace, about what else is on your mind in relation to art.
Yeah, well, you bring up earnestness, and I think that's been something that I think about quite often, because I feel like, we were saying earlier, I feel like we're both honest art, I'm sorry, we're both earnest artists. That I feel like I'm a very earnest person, and I feel like my art is very earnest as well. But unfortunately, I feel like we live in a time, and perhaps it's always been like this, where earnestness is kind of disdained, right? And it's kind of very uncool. I recently saw an interview with Ocean Vuong, who talked about how his students are so afraid of being cringe, right? This idea that they don't, and cringe is pretty much just being earnest, right?
Being earnest, sentimental, or whatever it is.
Like being honest about how you're feeling. And I feel like that is such a shame, but actually, I feel like it's worse than shame. I feel like it's almost a tragedy that we look down on earnestness, because I feel like it's that kind of honesty that is what makes great art, and great art is what makes what can change the world. I think that in children's books, especially, I also write novels, middle grade novels, and there's been this huge thing in middle grade novels where it's always the hero's journey, and it's this hero that has been that's been endowed with these great powers, like I guess you could see a better example would be like the Marvel movies. Like there's these heroic characters who have just been born with these great powers. They're like super strength, or they've got like, they're born to be queen, like they're special people, and while these are fun stories to read, these chosen one stories, they're fun stories, and I'm not putting them down, and I think we need some of them, but I do think we're almost there's so many of them.
They're
now.
Oversaturated.
Yes, they're oversaturated. And that gives the idea that you have to be special to be heroic. And I work really hard with my books, hoping that I can reach kids to show them, no. To be a hero, you don't have to be special. You can just be somebody trying your honest best.
Yes.
And if you just try your honest best, that is what can make you a hero. You can change things, affect things. You can be, what makes you special is not what talent or
some magic pill or like some.
It's this, what makes you special is just trying hard, and I guess that's what it is. It's that, I think the cringe is the people like the tryhards. I hate the tryhards. And I was like, I love the tryhards. Because they're doing something, so.
As you were saying that, I started thinking a bit about my mother, who was a school psychologist, and who she just reveled in all things creative, right? And I've been writing a bit about her, and I remembered that when she died, I had to go through her things, and she had gotten her hands on an antique Japanese loom. Now, my mother was she undertook all kinds of creative endeavor, Was she ever going to be a master weaver? No. But the process of engaging the making of something, what you were saying just reminded me that what I knew of her, having watched her learn how to undertake a Japanese tradition of using this incredible paper to cover boxes and she did all kinds of things. The process of undertaking creative endeavor and making can help, not only it feels to me like artists, but also humans. That there's something inherent in the creative project that is really important for the species. And I hear in some part of what you're saying that we're losing a bit of that. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. I think creating is really what connects us to being human, right? And that's really something special. And I mean, I think what we were talking about as getting older, but also this advent of AI, it's made me really appreciate what at one point I might have called bad art, right? Because like at, especially as students, we kind of get snobby or snotty. And because, and maybe I might have seen some art that maybe technically wasn't as well done, or maybe some art that, that maybe was maybe, like I said, maybe we'll just leave it as technically not as well done. And I might have looked down at that at one point, but now I see it and I feel like, you know what? That's great. That's wonderful. That is, somebody went out there and just wanted to make something and they did it. And that is that is life, and good for them. And
good for us.
Yeah, good for all of us. Like, and who knows? It's just trying to find that one connection and hope that it connects with more than one. And the more that it connects, the better. Like, that's it, how amazing. If it only connects with one, is still amazing, So that's why I think that my ideas about quote unquote bad art has changed too. Like, maybe I don't connect with what is maybe like what I would consider maybe not well done fairy on the wall, but it might connect with somebody, and that's really important.
I used to work in bookstores. And there was a moment when, and God knows, over the course of my life, I have had plenty of moments of literary snobbery. I mean, do you know what I mean? And honestly, like, it's ridiculous. But I remember a moment in particular when I just was standing and sort of looking at the bookstore, and realized, in the mystery section or in the poetry section, there are just a broad spectrum of types of books.
Yeah.
And, people would come in and ask me for, help.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking for a mystery of blah, blah, blah. And, then you have a series of questions. And what the questions we're trying to get at was, what is the gateway that I need to help this person find that will help them walk through? And once they get on this journey, they'll then go through different gateways. Yeah. And so the spectrum of work is the thing that allows all of us to engage in the practice of reading.
Yeah.
And it just was this moment I thought, God bless all of the writers who sat down every day and tried to make something and then actually made it and got it published. We had chutzpah and did whatever it was that they had to do, get out of their comfort zone to make a thing that was important to them that they hoped on some level might connect. That's a gorgeous thing.
Yeah, it's something that I think, the longer I've been in the publishing industry, it's been, and so many of my friends and colleagues, we go to these conferences, we go into the bookstores, and we see all these books, and we're like, it's humbling, and sometimes it's demoralizing, because you're like, gosh, does the world really need any more of my books?
What do I have to say?
Like, does the world really need my book?
Yeah.
And I always fall back on the two things. The one thing is, like, maybe the world doesn't need my books, but I need to make it.
Oh, interesting.
Because of all the things that we were saying about what it does for me on a purely selfish level. And then the other thing is, maybe the world doesn't need my book, but maybe there's one person in that world who does.
Maybe the little Grace Lin.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I keep thinking, and I just want to say this aloud, I am so thankful to your mother. You gave a shout out, but actually, I think it's really important. So in like 81, she's in Utica, New York.
Yeah.
So right, just to unpack it. So she's in Utica, New York, which, for people who don't know, is a small town in upstate New York, which is pretty rural and disconnected. There's not the internet, so you can't go to Amazon. Yeah. So she went out somehow, somewhere, and found those little tattered, nasty, poorly illustrated, bad paper books for her kid, which was not only a gift, but was a feat.
Yeah.
Was a feat. And I keep thinking about that in the back of my head, because the thing that our mothers give us, or our people who love us as children, allow us, they see something and then they try to amplify it or rectify it or inform it. I just think it's a really beautiful thing. I want to ask maybe a last or a second to last question. There are a lot of young people in the world who aspire to be artists. What if you were young again would you tell your young self today?
Gosh. Well, I think about this a lot because my daughter is, I can tell that she draws all the time, and I can tell she wants to be an artist of some kind, and I think about it, and I remember speaking to my husband about it, and he's like, "Well, of course she does. She sees you. Like you can't tell her it's not going to happen or it can't happen because you've made it happen, you know." And it's hard to say like, well, but I got lucky, you know. but then I think, you know what? What would I tell myself? I think that I feel like the thing that is most important is, I guess would be courage, right?
Interesting.
I think it's courage, because without courage, you don't do anything, right? I guess maybe it's hope and courage, because without hope, you don't have courage, right? So I think it's a mixture of those two things. I think if you always hold on to hope and courage, hope that you can do something, you know, and then take the courage to try to do something. And who knows, maybe it won't work out, but something will happen, you know? And I guess that we don't know what's going to happen. Who knows if there's even going to be books in 10 years, you know, but I think that if you are courageous and you just, this is your path and you keep going on your path, you'll go somewhere, right? And so I guess that's what I would think about mostly when I think about myself, like have courage, keep going. And I think that's the whole thing, because the saddest parts then I look back at my life have been the parts where I've lost courage, you know, where I've lost hope, where I've become cynical, like you were saying, because we've talked about how cynicism is not so much about being skeptical or being worried or thinking like things might not work out. Cynicism is more about the idea like it's never going to work, why bother, right? And those have been the most depressing, the saddest parts of my life, and it's been the parts where I've had the most courage to actually do things have not been the happiest, but those have been the turning points of my life that have brought me to my happiest points.
Last question.
Okay.
And you might have just answered it, but I'm more concrete.
Okay.
What might be your biggest either lesson or regret?
My biggest lesson and my biggest regret. Gosh.
Or not and, it could be or.
Or, okay. My biggest lesson. Okay, I'll answer that in two anecdotes. Or no, I'll answer my biggest lesson is probably when my first husband passed away. And when he passed away, I realized it's final, you know, like death is final. Like there's no, like everything else in life, there's always some kind of like, well, maybe I could do this, maybe I can do that. Can we do this? Like there's always some kind of pivot. But after you die, there's no pivot, you know? And when I realized that was like a really big lesson. I mean, everybody knows you're going to die, right? It's one thing to know it and one thing to believe it.
That's exactly right.
And when it hits you so personally up and close, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is all I've got.
This is it.
Yeah. And knowing that lesson is what made me move forward in so many of the books I did, like
interesting,
like Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. I had been scared to publish Where the Mountain Meets the Moon because I was afraid people might think I was culturally appropriating because I like all these things. And I was like, you know what? I just have to do it. And if people don't understand, I have to accept it. I have to let people misunderstand me. I have to let people believe what they believe, but I have to do this.
Courage.
Yeah, and that's the courage. And the anecdote that I like to leave people with is my daughter, when she was 4 years old, she said to me, I'm very smart. And she's like, as only a 4-year-old could be like, I'm so smart. And I was like, and I remember, as a good mom, and I was like, yes, you're very smart, but there are some things that are just as important, but are more important than being smart. And I was gonna be like, like working hard and being kind. And I was like, there are things that are just as important or more important than being smart. And she's like, yeah, I know, like be brave, being brave, blah blah blah. And when she said that, and she kind of said it like, yeah, be brave, I know. And then I was like, oh, it was because I hadn't been expecting her to say being brave was more important than being smart. And it kind of took me back. And of course, she is saying being brave because being brave for her was like using the toilet on the airplane.
Yeah.
Like, because I was like, be brave. You can do it. But it was so... I remember her words like really resonating. It was like one of those moments where I was like, oh. And I was like, yeah, it's true. Being brave is more important than being smart. It's being more important than all of those things. And I kind of felt like, oh, that's the mantra. And so like every once in a while when I'm like, I don't know what to do, I'm like, okay, be brave.
Be brave. Thank you. It's been so wonderful to talk with
you.
I just love talking and thinking with you about art and courage and story and identity and visibility. Thank you.
Thank
you for your work.
Oh, thank you.
Actually, the impact of your work is phenomenal.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you again, Grace, for joining me for this conversation. As always, I enjoyed thinking about what shapes our notions of identity, earnestness, and creativity with you. Your zest and optimism is such an inspiration, as are your books. Thank you for the work you've undertaken on behalf of us all, Grace. Join me next time for more inspiration and insight on It Starts With a Question. In the meantime, keep up with Grace at Grace Lin on Instagram and follow me on Instagram at Crystal Ann Williams. Learn more about RISD at risd.edu.